Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake, and this is Tachyon Blue. And today we're discussing GamerGate. Sir, I basically am hoping to find out why there's any disagreement at all about the way people behaved, uh, why they behaved the way that they did, and if my view of the other side of this thing isn't totally accurate. My hope is to discover that in fact it isn't, and there's something more reasonable about it. So let's just dive in. Can you tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what your relation to GamerGate is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tachyon Blue. Hopefully, we won't disagree as much as you might expect. But I was involved with GamerGate from about 2015 to 2018. I got involved because of creative freedom. I was concerned about censorship in the industry, and I also ran the St. Louis meetups for GamerGate in St. Louis, and I also ran two panels at conventions at Arch Anime and NatsuCon in St. Louis as well. And I wrote a book in 2019 also, Gamergate First Battle of the Culture War. I'm revisiting that topic now for a current project. I've interviewed over 70 people involved on both sides of the Gamergate controversy for an upcoming multi-volume series of books. Actually, I'll probably have a Kickstarter date picked either tomorrow or Thursday, most likely. By the end of the week, I should have a date set, and I'm going to launch a Kickstarter campaign to fund this project. I've already finished the first volume, which contains interviews with 8 people, I believe. It's Oran Dark Lord, he was a moderator of Kotaku in Action and GG Discussion. Also with Amanda Maroon, he was a member of the Keller Cabal, which was a sort of a faction within GamerGate, a group of friends who supported it basically. He also ran podcasts where he talked about it occasionally. I have also, and it also includes Alan Harris. He organized the Texas meetups in San Antonio, in particular, and Lisa M. She is a voice actress. She was involved with. She organized the Atlanta meetups in Atlanta, Georgia, and she also was involved with the uh, GamerGate animated series, which is this unfinished, unreleased animated sort of cartoon show depicting the events of GamerGate. Um, but that ended up not happening. But I interviewed her, and she also did a lot of art, like Vivian James related art. Also, several other people too, including an anti-GamerGate person, Wet Sprocket. So there's several people in the first volume that's been complete. I'm really excited for that. But yeah, I was supported GamerGate at the time. For this project, I'm more neutral, and I'm happy to dive into it. I watched your episode. I agree with a lot of what Tasha said. I think that you guys had a good back and forth discussion, and hopefully we can have that today too.
Yeah, when Tasha was basically for to fill in people that didn't see it. In a sentence, my feelings are basically a bunch of people with a chip on their shoulder uh, chose video games as a means to harass people, and that this was the first of many such mass cultural excuses for, excuse my bluntness here, but basically being the worst parts of bullies and nerds combined, and that it's advanced to just being basically modern politics. But the key thing that I believe that I'd really love to have changed, I'd like to have my mind changed because I don't like walking around believing this, is that basically it was the facts on in the world were irrelevant, and it was just an excuse for, frankly, awful human beings to gang up on others. Um, walking around looking at your neighbors and thinking who amongst you is like this is not a healthy way to exist. So this help me out there.
Okay.
What from your perspective was actually happening
Well, that's how much time do you have? Gamer gets a
in
huge
the
topic.
shortest
Okay,
possible
all right.
summary?
So this is sort of on the fly here. I'm still thinking about how I want to approach interviews, but Yeah, basically, I would say that GamerGate was about ethics in game journalism. It was a movement that was started in part due to backlash, in large part due to backlash to the games press, because there was an ethical violation. You know about, I know you talked about it in your first episode where Nathan Grayson and Zoe Quinn, where he didn't disclose his relationship with her and his friendship with her at the time when he promoted her game over 49 others on Rock Paper Shotgun, right? And then also the
Let's
Kotaku article.
let's pause there for a second. Yeah, you say an ethical violation. On the scale of ethical violations, my understanding is this guy had a relationship with somebody who he reviewed the video game of. Is that the
No, he
correct way to
didn't.
say it?
He didn't review her game. So there were two articles. He wrote three articles promoting her or her work basically, or talking about her. But the first article that was in 2012. That was before their friendship really began or anything like that. So I wouldn't hold that against him.
Okay.
But
So
are you
two
familiar?
articles that we
Two
actually care
articles.
about.
Two articles that we care about. Yeah, one was a 2014 article. I did send this in the Tachyon's take too. It was the rock paper shotgun one. Admission Quest, Valve Steam Valve Greenlight gives the green light to 49 new games, and which that he promoted her game. He calls it a powerful twine darling, and says it to stand out. He picks that and two Depression Quest. He picks that game and two other games on the list of 50, and he recommends those basically over the others on the list. And then
Mm.
the other article he did was the other one's probably actually more serious a violation actually, um, because he wrote about the Polaris Game Jam. Are you familiar with this? In 2014?
No.
Okay. So there was a game jam in 2014. It collapsed. It was run by a man named Matty Lesham, and Matty Lesham he basically lost his job after this. The project collapsed, but it had a lot of corporate sponsorships, and Zoe Quinn was a person involved with this. So was John Tron and a couple other people as well. And
Let's not get hung up on
okay,
details. So in a one sentence summary, it starts because a guy is sweet on a girl, and she's a video game maker, and he includes her in a couple of articles praising her basically, and
yeah.
ranks her higher than other people that you feel should have
Well,
been
I don't
higher
like.
ranked in the
I'm
video game world,
agnostic on like how he should have ranked it. I just think he should have added
or other
disclosure to the
people.
article. Like he should have just
Fair
been
enough.
like, "Hey, look, this is my friend. Yeah, her game is one of the. He could even say, right? I really do genuinely believe this is one of the top games out of this list for sure.
But
But
just
just a
being
heads up.
upfront about the
Yeah.
fact that they knew each other. Yeah. Okay. Uh, so we start with that, and let's put it in context, so at least that you understand where I'm coming from. And I'll acknowledge, video game industry, big business overall, so it should be taken seriously. On the other hand, it is literally fun and games. So it is literally uh, uh, an industry for making toys, and these might be toys that grown-ups enjoy as well. But it's literally games. We go from there, and somebody saying, you should have disclosed that you knew this person. Standard journalism practice, doesn't matter if it's video games or if it's politics. You gotta disclose a conflict of interest. Fair enough. To people sending death threats and a bunch of like a collection of people who have met up over this kernel, this first cancerous cell. To people, they've met up over this, and now every freaking time, a video game stars anyone, or even includes a character that is anything other than a straight white male who hates women and is clear about that constantly. They send hate after hate. Like, do you see? I'm
No,
obviously
yeah, no. I
exaggerating to
I
be
I, I
silly,
just want to
but
say,
it blows up. So what happens there? How does it blow up and become this other thing?
well, I think that there might be a disconnect. And that might be because like, so do you? Let me just ask you: do you view GamerGate through like this culture war lens, like that GamerGate either is part of the culture war or like is the culture war in the video game industry, and like therefore like the people arguing about whether or not, let's pick a recent example, right? Whether or not Black Myth Wukong, right? Would you call that like a Gamergate thing?
I don't know that I might be familiar with
I'm
the
sorry, that
Black
was a
Myth
that,
Wukong
yeah,
arguments.
that wasn't really controversial. I meant to say what was it? The Assassin's Creed game, how they have the Black Samurai, right? Yeah, Yasuke or whatever.
Oh yeah, real historical figure actually. But I wasn't familiar with that being a controversy. But you know what? I would say it's probably related. I would
Okay.
say it's philosophically a direct descendant because there is this permission structure online for people to behave terribly, basically to call racism or sexism or just generally foul behavior. This is an ethical matter, but it's not. It's really not.
Yeah, I don't.
That's my
I
thoughts,
I mean, I would agree with
bluntly
you
put.
actually. I don't think that the culture war stuff was Gamergate. I think that Gamergate was like a part of the culture war, and I don't think it was the first
Mm.
battle of the culture war. My first premise in my 2019 book was I wouldn't say wrong, but like greatly exaggerated. I think. So I'm revisiting the topic. But no, I don't. I think that that's separate. The culture war stuff. I don't think that's what Gamergate was about for most of the people involved. But there was a faction of Gamergate that did want to bring that in.
To me, it seems like Mark Furman. Do you remember the OJ? This might be a little old for you, but do you remember the OJ Simpson trial?
No, I don't. Sorry.
In short, there was a cop named Mark Furman who uh, fabricated evidence against O.J. Simpson, and it's largely responsible for why Simpson got a not guilty verdict. And Gamergate reminds me of this because the folks who were initially uh, up in arms over this were correct. Like in this case, the police in Simpson's case, they were also correct. And then they fabricated evidence, which ironically put them in the incorrect category. It gave the jury no choice but to say, well, we can't find this guy guilty. You've got this cop who's using the N-word constantly, he's been written up for it. And we just found out he lied about evidence. So we got to toss this thing out. It's the same thing with Gamergate. There was initially a relatively small issue, but it's handled by basically online harassment. And if I understand correctly, you're saying those folks from the online harassment portion of things, they don't really represent Gamergate.
I would say that. Yeah, I think that a small number of people did engage in harassment. Like a small percentage of people did engage in harassment on both sides, actually, against the Gamergate people and against the anti-Gamergate people. And I think
Well,
that
the
that's
anti
condemnable.
Gamergate people, I mean, the Gamergate people, to be real, had it coming. If you're talking about the people online who are saying like they're dropping slurs, they're saying, "Oh, well, you can't make video games starring women," or saying, "Oh, you're replacing men. You're trying to replace us," when it's just like a video game with a female protagonist.
But I don't
Like
think that's what the
they
Gamergate
got it
people were
coming,
saying.
don't they?
I don't think they
Oh
would
my
have it coming even if
word!
they did say that.
What? All right. Well, fair enough, but the interesting part for me is that you're saying that's not the Gamergate people. To
No, I mean
me,
some of
that's
them
the
might be
most.
Gamergate people, right? It depends because
I
like
mean, that's the Gamergate I'm familiar with.
mhm.
I first heard about it in terms of the people basically harassing video game makers, and then later I'm like, oh, this comes from an actual controversy. So where do you draw the line, and how do you say, well, these are Gamergate people, and these other people who are embarrassing, these are not? Is
I
it
personally
that they're going for
use
different things?
self-identification. If they self-identify as a Gamergate person, then I'm basically would say that they're a Gamergate person. Unless there's like
Okay,
some really
that's
weird
fair.
situation, like if somebody like there is I think one case where I would not do that specifically, and I have I guess made that decision. Like there were third-party trolls involved. Like one guy was named
Mm.
Terradex. He did harass Brianna Wu, and Zoe Quinn actually, and like, a bunch of Gamergate people too. He harassed Acid Man, who ran the Gamergate HQ forums, and he harassed. Well, he denies that now, but there's evidence that he admitted to doxing him basically, or admitting to
Oh,
having his
jeez.
docs in an IRC chat room. He also like I don't know if you call it harassment, but he fucked with a bunch of Gamergate live streamers by like going on their shows and yelling the N word and stuff to get them banned
Oh,
from the
jeez.
platform, right? But like, but so he is a third party troll. He even admits he's a third party troll. But he also would like as part of his trolls, one of his trolls, he held up a sign and he held up a sign that said, I support Gamergate because I hate women and want them to die. Like I wouldn't classify him as pro Gamergate, And he wouldn't classify himself that way, but he holds up the sign. But yeah, self-identification is what I would use like 99% of cases. There could be some edge cases like that where I wouldn't count them, but yeah, self-ID.
And you've brought up a really interesting point there, which is that there's somebody on the, as you would say, anti-GamerGate side who's behaving terribly
Oh, he's
and
not anti.
doxing people.
I mean, he's against both.
Fair enough, but the point being, there's somebody rabble rousing
Mhm.
online who's as I've just done, easily confused with one side or another. That's the very thing that I was talking about earlier, saying like, well, the GamerGate people are out there doing all these horrible things. It's the very same thing we were just talking about. So, all right, that lightens the load on my soul a little
Mhm.
bit to know that there's a group of people out there basically just trolling. In so what they're self-identifying as GamerGate. What do you consider GamerGate to be? It's looking for ethics in video game journalism. That's what I heard originally. Yes.
So that's what I would define it as now. For the project, I didn't really go in with the definition. I would
Mm,
ask people basically. I didn't actually. I asked them either directly or indirectly, and then I collated all of their answers basically, all of them from the Pro Gamergate side at least. I'm still doing that. It's still a long process, but I'm basing my definition of Gamergate based on how they answered in my interviews with them. And so far, out of the ones I've transcribed, except for actually it just changed because I interviewed somebody who just flew the numbers up a little bit. But basically, it's like 95% of the people involved say it was about ethics in games journalism. Now there is a faction of people like Kraut, who I interviewed. Kraut, you know the YouTuber Kraut.
no, I don't.
Okay, well he's a big YouTuber, political scientist. He focused on political science, but he was in it for just the culture war. He even says like, I don't care about the ethics stuff. I barely remember the ethics stuff to be honest. So like for him, he's just a culture warrior. And there might have been like one other person maybe who I think he might have been the only one, but there might have been one other person too who was also like that I've interviewed. But for most of the people involved, it was about ethics in games journalism. And but the problem where it gets complicated, right, is because it's a leaderless online movement. Some people have definitions that go beyond that. So like everybody except for Kraut agrees that Gamergate's about ethics in games journalism, basically. But then there's a cohort. I'm not sure how big it is yet, though. I don't know. But somewhere between like 30% and 60%. I don't know which. We'll find out in the end. But there's a cohort that also thought it was about opposing censorship and supporting artistic freedom in the games industry. And so they add that onto it too. And so that broadens it into like this massive thing. And I did that when I was part of
Interesting.
Gamergate too. I was part of the artistic freedom group. That was my primary censorship
Now,
and artistic
was
freedom.
it artistic freedom that only tended to crop up in the form of it's got to be a straight white male protagonist, and anytime it's not, we say that's not artistic freedom? Or was it actually about artistic freedom?
Well, I guess it depends on who you talk to, right? Some people are hypocrites, but I personally would hold the view consistently across the board. Now, there were some people who didn't, right? Like, do you know One Angry Gamer? He ran it's a website. He was a big blogger back in the mid 2000s, mid 2010s.
That did he do a bunch of Nintendo games?
He might
No,
have.
I
I don't
don't.
know all of his
I don't
content,
remember.
but yeah, he was a big blogger back in the mid 2010s, and he 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 basically went off the deep end because of the Gamergate stuff, I guess in part, or I don't know if it was because of that, but he did. And he ended up picking a bunch of fights with people on the Pro Gamergate side and made like a list of enemies, people who he hates, and then he also promoted like criticism of Mortal Kombat because he thought that the game wasn't sexy enough. He called it boner culture, didn't appeal to his boner culture. So like there were people like that who were hypocrites, but I think I mean I don't know if most people were consistent or not. I don't have like data on this. How do you even test that? I don't know. But like I'd like to think that they were consistent, and I don't think most of them were like opposed to like diversity in games. I'm certainly not. I wasn't back then, and I don't think most of the people who I've interviewed are. But there are people who are like culture warrior types, and they probably are more opposed to that, or at least like even they would probably like caveat it. However, I mean, whether or not you believe them is your own story, but like I'm sure most of them would say that they're not opposed to diversity in
Well,
games. Like if you talk to like an
there's
anti-SJW
very
YouTuber,
the reason people don't really believe is because, or when people say, well, it's about this very reasonable sounding thing, is that that's all the worst behavior comes with a very reasonable sounding excuse, but you have to look at the totality of the behavior and what tends to happen. Like, for example, earlier when I'm like, was it just an excuse to complain every time it's not a straight white guy in a video game? Or you see the same thing with movies. It's like, this is a woke movie because one of the 5 co-stars is a lesbian. Uh, it's it's common. It's basically, I would argue it's the standard. It's when if you were to take 10 people talking about this topic online, and you and all of 10 of them consider themselves pro Gamergate, let's say, 8 of them are just looking for excuses to harass people, and there might be 2 that are like, oh well, I sincerely just care about ethics in reporting on a specific industry, but
Mhm.
that's 2 out of 10, you know?
What?
So
Why
if
do you
you're
think it's 2 out of 10?
because of the frequency of people I see talking about this. Like when I go on to other shows where people are debating, for example, and somebody's like, oh, I'm going to take a pro gamer gate side or whatever. I shouldn't say this like I debate
Hmm.
Gamergate. I don't. But when I encounter this, and admittedly it's as a viewer, so the algorithm's going to affect things. The folks I see talking about this stuff spend about 30 seconds talking about ethics and then 45 minutes talking about great replacement theory. And that's who I end up seeing most. And the other side of it is I don't see, without that element, Gamergate is not deserving of getting this much attention as it has. Without that element, it's a relatively niche, interesting to me, but niche story about the video game industry. Oh, we've got to have more ethical standards. This is a bigger business than it used to be. When we report on it, we should do serious reporting. Okay, fine. But that's not the sort of thing where you'd expect books to be written, multiple books to be written, documentaries to be made, forums to exist, a whole guy, you say angry video game nerd, a whole guy's career getting
It's a
derailed.
different person, but
Okay, fair
yeah,
enough.
but yeah.
But the point being, it's a smaller topic than it would be without all the hate mongering involved.
I don't think there was that
So
much. So what? Well, let me ask you now. What do you think the political breakdown of Gamergate people was? And like, I'm not like you haven't studied this topic. I'm not trying to like gotcha here, but like, what do you think
yeah, no,
their
it's
political ethics were?
this is a good question because we should explore my ignorance and my assumptions. My assumptions would be 95% far right.
Okay. So are you? So there's a study that's been done by Brad Glasgow and Chris Ferguson. Chris Ferguson is a games researcher at Stetson University. I can link you this study. Um, and Brad Glasgow is a journalist who looked into it. I've interviewed both of them, but this is like the only peer-reviewed study on the political leanings of Gamergate people. So the
Mm,
methodology he used, and this isn't the full results. If you ask Chris, I can get you in touch with him if you want. But if you ask him, he'll send you the full results. But this is only the stuff that they published because they compared it with Pew Research, and here's what their methodology was. They interviewed, I think it was like 700 people. Yeah, 725 people, and they uh, they didn't interview them. They sent them a survey, but they required that um, everybody involved have past support of Gamergate. So they had to send proof that they'd either tweeted about it or made like Reddit posts about it, or like posted on Facebook or something. They had to have proof prior to the announcement of the survey, um, that they would support Gamergate. So it was all people who had confirmed with Brad and Chris that they supported Gamergate. I was one of the people who took the survey, by the way, and they asked them a battery of questions. It ended up being there's way more questions than is published just here on this page, but they published a huge battery of questions, getting demographic data, political views, a bunch of other stuff, and it's a very politically diverse group of people. I myself am a liberal, and Let's see here. It says 7.8% extremely liberal, 35.1% liberal, 19.6% slightly. But then, and they also asked about individual questions too. So like on every issue except for affirmative action, the Gamergate people were actually more liberal or progressive than the median American. Except for there were two questions that they didn't have Pew data to compare it to. But out of the questions
You
that they
said
did have data,
82% consider themselves to be more liberal or progressive than the median American. Did I hear that
no,
right?
no, sorry. Out of the people involved with Gamergate, that all, on every specific issue that they asked and that they compared with Pew Research data, the Gamergate people were more liberal. So like gay marriage,
Oh,
abortion, universal health
yeah.
care, marijuana, except for affirmative action.
When that's true of most Americans, though, including uh, everybody who votes MAGA.
Well,
The
no, I mean that
when
wasn't
asked
true
about
then.
the individual, it's been pretty universally. When asked about the actual issues they support, yeah, Americans skew way, way to the left of where they vote. But when you have somebody describing themselves as a liberal, I think, okay, so not leftist, because nobody on the left describes themselves as a liberal.
Yeah.
It's like it's a thing that makes you wince when you're on the left. If somebody calls you a liberal, you're like, don't call me that. So it tells me a little bit about what we're talking. Like, okay, so
Well, I should,
center right, right,
but well,
but I
there
don't know
were
about
far
left.
left people involved too. Like I've interviewed them as well. They were
Fair
probably
enough.
not as big. There's not like as many far left people, or far right, I would say either, compared to like people in the center left, center right. But also like depends on how you like define far right. Like some people today would say like the entire Republican Party is far right because of Trump,
Yeah,
right?
I would. Yeah, I would actually. That's in terms of the policies being advocated for. Yes. But so that sort of they can be far right and not have like be guilty of the things I think the Gamergate folks largely are.
Right. That's
But
a separate
again, I
question from
say like,
harassment.
yeah, we're the main thing that you're saying here is that there's the online trolls and then there's Gamergate. And Gamergate's different than the reputation it largely has brought on by those online trolls. So you all right, it's an insistence on ethics in video game journalism. I don't think though, from an outsider's perspective, from a cultural perspective, that really is I don't know if it's accurate to be calling that movement Gamergate. Because to me, that that phrase is talking as much about the cultural moment as it is a particular movement. And frankly, ethics in journalism, full stop, has been around forever. And just specifying video game journalism doesn't make it all that much of a new thing, other than if you're pointing out that the industry had a history of being unethical.
Well,
Does it?
I think that a lot of people have the perception, at least, that was the case. Like
Mm.
with the Kane and Lynch situation at GameSpot, where they fired him, Jeff Gersman, because he gave the gave a Kane and Lynch 2 a bad review. But like,
Oh yeah.
but also like I think we're like this like the original ethical violation was like relatively minor. You even say yourself, right? It's relatively minor, but like this thing whole blew up because of like how people responded to it. That's my perception of it. I think that's like most of the GamerGate pro GamerGate people's perception. Because you had like the Gamers Are Dead articles that came out. Are you familiar with these? You didn't really talk about it in
Vaguely.
your okay, yeah. You didn't really talk about it too much in your last episode where you talked about GamerGate, but basically a bunch of articles came out. I think it was like 19 articles in total, and they over most of them came out on August 28th, 2014, but some of them came out like a few days later, and they were arguing that the gamer identity. They were like various different arguments that we're making, but like Leigh Alexander's argument was that like the gamer identity needs to come to an end because it's got a bad reputation. Because when people think of gamers, they think of kids with mushroom hats standing in line for 6 hours to get the new video game release or whatever, right? And then like Devin Wilson wrote one of them too for Gamasutra, and his perception was that like we need to change the way games are made. He made rules for game developers to follow in theory. like having less sexy characters in games, having less violence in games, less competitive gameplay, or not. He didn't say competitive gameplay, but less focus on competition, things like this. So like there were a lot of different arguments being thrown around. A lot of people were like, "Well, hang on, why are all these articles coming out on the same day saying that gamers are dead, stuff like that?" And then it was indicated that there was collusion a few weeks after that with William Usher, actually the person I mentioned before, One Angry Gamer. He ended up actually leaking. He was a part of this group, this Game Journal Pros group, a mailing list of games journalists. He ended up leaking that information out, and so the reason it blew up so big was because of a mix of censorship, a lack of willingness to reform from the games journalists, this gamers are dead kind of push, and I think a lot of people also just had like really extreme views, and they wanted to like push those views. And like maybe you wouldn't consider these views extreme, but like a lot of some of the more social justice stuff, warrior stuff, like was extreme. I think that they wanted to sort of close the Overton window and push people out, and they pushed them out in part by calling them Gamergate,
Hmm.
and
I
then
see.
trying to attribute to them, harassment and misogyny or far right views.
Well, fair enough. So it seems to me like it's a part of the problem is just labeling. And all, you know what? Another cultural thing that began around the era of Gamergate being genuine discourse being ruined by trolls and infiltrators of all sorts who are posting more extreme opinions than was being talked about and ruining it for everybody. Do you see any value gained out of Gamergate, the whole thing for society?
I mean, like, I think I mean, it depends on like it touched so many areas. In some ways, yes. I think that Gamergate was successful in some ways with regards to ethics. I think that disclosure's gotten better in games journalism. I think that part of that's the FTC too. Like, and that was partly Gamergate too. Partly Gamergate people with Operation Ultraviolet Light, they contacted the FTC and got them to change. But a lot of people contacted the FTC, not just them, to get them to change the uh, regulations on disclosure. And so now they're required to disclose uh, if they receive payment from companies, things like this. So they've gotten better on disclosure, I feel. There's also, I think, having the conversation is a good step in the right direction. But also, too, I think that it's bad that GamerGate, I think, was very broadly misrepresented. I think this caused a lot of breakdown in trust. I think a lot of people don't trust institutions in the United States of America or the world, perhaps, in part because of GamerGate. And I think that this is talk about the GamerGate people specifically. I think the wide-ranging impact of GamerGate on society as a whole is quite small, probably, but
Hmm.
um, but the impact it had on the people involved is probably quite grand in many cases, um, where it does, I think, help shape people's worldview because people took so many different things away from it. Some of them took away a lack of trust in media because they saw this get misrepresented in their own eyes. Other people, they took away a dislike of social justice warriors, right? Because they didn't like the way that they were being treated by them, or they perceived themselves to be as being treated by them. And other people took away nothing. I mean, they took away something, but they didn't take away any like grand narratives. Like their life remained mostly unchanged. Um, so like I don't know, like it affects people in different ways. Some people have extreme reaction to one way or another. Other people it affects them a little bit. Other people it has no impact at all. So like I don't know. I don't think Gamergate's impact on the world was big.
Has there been any attempt amongst the people who consider themselves to be gamer gators to reckon with the fact that there actually were people harmed by these online trolls? They're actually the well. You know what? Let me start like this. Is there an understanding amongst gamer gators that they are viewed by the casual observer as being absolutely no different than the online trolls?
I don't know if the casual observer does view them that way. I think it depends on like what circles you run in. I think the circles that you run in will
It's
probably
fair.
view people very hostile. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I don't think. Yeah, but like I don't know. It just depends like on what area
It'd be
you're
like
in.
this. It'd be like if you were a member of uh, uh like if you joined like a Scottish. Let me try this again. It'd be like if you put on a ghost costume and you went for a Halloween celebration in the park, and you find out everybody there is also dressed like a ghost. And actually, nope, you've wandered into a clan rally, and that's when somebody takes a picture. If you're saying I'm a GamerGate person, I believe in ethics and game journalism. From my crowd, or
Hmm?
hell, from the crowd of just me, it looks like the ghost in the clan rally.
I think that's
Um,
because you've fallen for misinformation. I'm sorry, but I think it is. I think if you knew the GamerGate people, you wouldn't be saying that. And
well,
look,
I don't know
some
any
people,
of them.
they're not all angels, right? That's certainly true. There were people involved with GamerGate who engaged in harassment. I think everyone involved with GamerGate practically,
I only know
knows
the
that.
practical effects
Mhm.
of the movement, and there might have been some changes to the industry that may or may not have come regardless, simply with a casual pointing out of, hey, we are a letter to the editor, frankly. But by and large, what it was this beginning of a cultural movement to it was the now let me put it like this because I don't want to assign it responsibility for the whole cultural movement. It was the first time we noticed a bunch of people with bad intentions glamming on an excuse to pursue those bad intentions. And the actual excuse being, let's call it Gamergate itself, being the ethics in video game journalism, has almost nothing to do with what ended up happening with this just wave of online hate mongers harassing people who make video games, who write about video
I
games,
don't know that they
making
did
the
that
whole
much though.
industry
Like that's
seem
the thing.
shady.
Like
You don't
I don't think that the vast majority of people involved with Gamergate were supporting of harassment. I think that they had a culture that more or less condemned it. I mean, I ran one of the big Gamergate Discord servers at the time. We had pretty strict rules. So did Kotaku in Action. So did Gamergate HQ. So did V. Now, who didn't have strict rules later on, like was like GG Revolt. There was another community, and I would say that that community, members of it at least, did support and encourage harassment. Um, but I think that by far, like the major GamerGate communities were very much opposed to that. Yes. And if you look at like
I
so, go ahead.
as an outsider, then what I would recommend doing for Gamergate folks who still exist today is a PR campaign. Because I will just tell you from my niche of the internet, which is not all lefties, just the various forums I'm in and yada yada. If you were to casually say, "What's a GamerGate person believe?" They'd be like, that Adolf Hitler was right," and like they're it's gonna have nothing to do with what you say it's about, and that's a shame because at the end of the day, I think that's correct. We should have ethics in video game journalism. And that initial incident, yeah, the guy should have reported he knew the person. Absolutely. But it's just the view of it to the casual person that I have ever talked to about this is not what it is. And that goes to the initial question. So it sounds like, yeah, there's nothing being done to address that because it's not seen as a problem. Um, do you think there's anything we can learn about the vulnerability of an online movement to trolls? Is there a way you now have the wisdom of having endured this? The movement still exists.
No,
You're
I wouldn't say it
still
still
yeah.
exists. I view it entirely historical. I think most of the people,
Really?
yeah, I think most of the people, almost everybody that I've interviewed. There are perhaps people who don't agree with that, but the vast majority of the people I've interviewed um, view it as a historical event, like from about 2014 to 2018. And living through the event at the time, I think that 2018 is probably a good place to put it because like that's when
Mm.
things really slowed down. Like late 2017, 2018, there was the activity really started drying up. The last of the GamerGate meetups in real life um, that were publicly advertised at least was in 2018. That was in St. Louis from me, and that was San Francisco. That was the last of their meetups. The Toronto people might be doing something next year, they say, but that's like way later.
So what happens at those meetups? What are you talking
We
about?
harass women in real life.
Good, good, good.
No, but sorry, I couldn't help myself.
That was
Um,
perfect.
but no, so basically it just depends. Like, but it's mostly just hanging out, really. I've hosted like four or five in St. Louis. The first one we did was at an arcade. Dave and Buster's actually. We met up. It was like me and like 6 people, and hung out, played some arcade games. That was it. Then we went to a mall actually, uh, in the local mall in the area. We hung out. That was a different day. That was like 3 people though. That was a pretty small group. St. Louis doesn't have that many GamerGate people. And then we did one with like 6 or 7 people, including an anti-GamerGate person, um, at a cigar lounge actually, because I knew the owner of the venue and he let us do a debate there. So we actually had a real life debate, and me and the anti-GamerGate person. It was live streamed at the time, but I the video is long since gone, unless she has a copy of it. Maybe the person I debated. Um, but yeah, no, it's we just hang out, talk. Sometimes we'll debate people if there's like an anti-GamerGate person there, to hang out and just grab drinks. I know that
So
you
what are
might.
they talking about then? If they're anti-Gamergate and you're debating them, what's the debate about?
I don't remember, man. I actually don't. I think mostly we talked about like artistic freedom stuff. I think at the time at the debate, but I don't recall. I mean, this was 2018. This was 6 years ago.
Hmm.
Um,
All
yeah.
right, so then let me take this in another, well, same direction, different angle. On the forums, what are you talking about? You're saying ethics in game journalism. Are you on the lookout for unethical behavior? What do people consider to be unethical behavior typically here?
So there's a good website we can use. It's called Deep Freeze. Deepfreeze.it. I'll link this. Now the
Oh,
forums
perfect.
though,
Thank you.
like as for the forums, like today the GamerGate forums don't really talk about anything. I guess like Kotaku and Action's become an anti-social justice warriors community. Um, that one has gone like in an
Not
anti-CW direction, for sure. But
that's
then
interesting.
like V and stuff, they just talk about video games basically, I guess. But GamerGate HQ doesn't really exist anymore. It's just purely an archive. But like this website here, this would like help you define like what they view as ethical or not. And there's some disagreement about you could have about this stuff. Let's see. Try to find a good page that we could look at and go through. Well, why don't we just go to journalists and then pick
Okay.
anybody from the list, and we'll go through and talk about if that works for you.
First name, Chris Ligman. Her This Week in Video Games column is considered part of the Gamers Are Dead media blitz, despite having been published a few days after the main blitz. Critical. Oh, so these are not people who contribute, or is it?
Well, these
Who
are
is
games
this?
journal. All these people are games journalists, basically, or
Hmm.
editors, journalists, in other capacities.
And what is what is this I'm reading about? Like it's a summary. I don't understand.
So,
Critical. Yeah.
GamerGate people put this website together to catalog ethical violations, basically, that were happening in games journalism, sort of like a watchdog. Um, so the numbers next to their names, the entries, that shows how many potential conflicts of interest there could be. And then there's also other modifiers too. Like if it has a band-aid next to it, that means that they've issued a correction, or like apologized or something like that for the behavior. So like Chris Ligman, I don't like, the the reason this is showing here for the Gamers Are Dead thing is collusion, because I guess the person who Bone Golem, who runs the website, or other people who are helping him out, are of the perception that the Gamers Dead articles were caused by collusion, or most likely caused by collusion. Like you can agree with that or disagree with it, but
Yeah, I'm looking at this picture. I don't see anybody who colludes in a way that makes them rich, at least. But yeah, point taken that you can have unethical behavior on a small scale for small stakes. Absolutely, sure. So what's the goal here? These are people who are tracking various journalists and giving them ratings essentially,
yeah. Well,
or
the
entries.
ratings are like, yeah, entries really. And then like, there's different criteria too. So it's like, so you see like there should be somewhere on the website that goes through the full. Oh yeah, rules. Go to rules. It will tell you how
Here
they
we
rate
go.
things, like censorship, dishonesty, intimidation.
Link to direct sources and try to. All right, I like that second one. Mainstream media journalists are provisionally not being filed. That I despise. I would prefer the opposite of that, but okay, I get it. They don't have to make something that makes me happy. Entries that are more ambiguous. That's just personal. I hate the mainstream media. Entries that are more ambiguous or apologized for have modifiers applied to them. Okay. The overall goal here, though, does seem to be to pour a lot of effort into making life as hard as possible. No, it's not it. It's to make video game journalists honest. It just, to me, I see it and red flags go up for me and make me feel better about this. The red flags are this. These people are poor. I know journalists, not video game journalists, but I know journalists. They're dirt poor. They're writing articles about something. Usually, I'm going to assume that they're passionate about, but that has a passionate fan base, and that fan base has more time and resources than the journalists can ever fathom. And the things that the fan base are complaining about, to me, seem like they are real things, but taken too seriously can be taken way out of hand. Like, for example, you've called it collusion a couple of times. Part of the Gamers Are Dead media blitz. I don't think that's a fair characterization of anything. And again, I'm just looking at a picture thumbnail here.
Mhm.
But with that, that this person has ever been involved in colluding, it just seems it seems like it's an
Yeah,
online
in
dork
this
who.
case, well, in this case, yeah, they're basically throwing that on there because she wrote one of the articles that came out during
Okay.
that week period. But most, yeah, so like their perception, I
And
guess. I don't have
and
to
do you
agree with
see
them.
where
You can disagree with them. That's fine.
my trepidation would
Yeah.
come from? It's like, okay, so somebody sees that, they see she's got 26 entries, and then all that effort is put into this one person. You know, there's gonna be someone's gonna find her Twitter and say, "You gotta die."
Oh, you
Like
can just
this,
click right
the
here and go to it.
legitimate people are being used as a resource for the horror show, and I gotta wonder, is the legitimate thing worth it? Or do we even have it? We could say this. You have an ethical obligation to not let the misuse of something end its existence. So in this case, legitimate tracking of journalists, that's a good thing. If people are misusing that, there's an argument there. Uh, Do you acknowledge, or do you agree with me? Not acknowledge. Do you agree with me that there is a possible danger here in these hobbyist or these writers of a hobby having this level of scrutiny?
I think it's good. I think that it helps hold them
Hmm.
accountable. Now, obviously, if on the website they were encouraging people to harass them or anything like that, I think that then it would be wrong. That'd be encouraging harassment. But they don't do that. And I think that
Fair.
I think it's all positive. I think this is all publicly available information, basically, that's already on there. Like if you go to the sources that they use, like you can go through the sources yourself. It's already public stuff. It's just all gathered together in one place, basically. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like it's all fine.
I would like to see with this. Uh, I guess here's my main issue. What I don't see is any warning on here, uh, anything acknowledging that, frankly, the trolls who had the barnacles who are suctioned on to this movement are more of a problem than the worst author, the worst journalist on here, because these journalists are not out there threatening people's
Wow.
lives, doxing people.
Wow.
At
Check
the
on
very least,
click on
if
the
they
second one. Click on the second one. Just do it, Leigh
oh,
Alexander.
you know what? I will. I will. I'd love. Works for the Guardian. That doesn't surprise me. Spearheaded the media blitz, member of Game Journal. Whatever.
The
Let's just
spicy stuff's
assume she's
further down.
awful.
The spicy stuff's further
Okay.
down.
All right. Let me. I want to see something spicy.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
attacked writer and physically and threatened to sick her.
No, not physically.
Oh, okay. Well, publicly threatened to end careers. Oh, here we go. Here's the good stuff. Publicly encouraged doxing. Okay, good. All right, so withdrawn on that front. But still, what I don't see on here is acknowledgement that let's be frank, vast majority of the shady behavior has come from the trolls associating themselves with the Gamergate movement. not the GamerGate movement itself. But like, I'd like to see GamerGate itself take some responsibility, because they are at the same time the cover for really horrible people doing really horrible things. I'd like to see them up top on that website saying, "Hey, this is not a thing for you to use to yada yada."
Well,
At the same
so
time, it's a burden. I get it.
no, but no, I completely get it. They probably like I don't know if I haven't asked Bone Golem about this question. I can get you in touch with him. He's the founder of the website. But yes, their perception would be that we shouldn't like let them try to define our movement. We'll just do that ourselves. And like they perceive, most of them, I think, I don't know about. It's probably people have so many different views. I don't have like data on that specifically. I probably will at the end of this project. But like a lot of people are of the view that like, okay, look, the harassment claims against GamerGate. Like yes, there were people who did get harassed, and people, including people in GamerGate who did engage in harassment. There were people involved, but it's a very small number of people who did engage. So, should they condemn it? Yeah, I think so. I think that in the beginning, people really tried. So there was multiple efforts to do this. One of which was the GamerGate Harassment Patrol on Twitter. It was its own hashtag, though some people didn't use the hashtag with it. GamerGate Harassment Patrol on Twitter. And they would try to go around and like try to find harassment and report it to Twitter, stuff like that. Then they also, like when Felicia Day was doxxed by somebody, no one knows who it was. It was an anonymous user. Doxxed Felicia Day. The GamerGate people came out and condemned it. I could link you this too.
No, I believe it. I take it at face value. Good.
And then there was also zero. I think the harassment was greatly overblown though too. Or at least from GamerGate people specifically, it was like mostly mistargeted towards like the trolls. It was mostly the trolls doing it. But like there's 3 studies that have been done on harassment in GamerGate.
This is useful, actually.
So
all right, hit me.
Well, one of them has like methodology I wouldn't necessarily like endorse, but you know what? I'll just pull up here. Well, not on that screen. Give me 2 seconds here. Do you want to go over the Women Action Media study, which is methodology they used? Was they there's an anti-gamer, there's a list of GamerGate people basically called the GamerGate Auto Blocker. It's a list that was created by Randy Harper. She's against GamerGate. And it's based on like if you follow a certain number of people who support GamerGate, according to Randy Harper at least, then you get added to this list of GamerGate supporters, basically, right? So Women Action Media is this group that was granted access to data by Twitter to study GamerGate and harassment. And they found, so they looked at internal reports on Twitter, and they when people went to file a report during this period, they could choose to check an option when they report it. It says, will you submit this data to our third party analyzers, whatever, right? So they can have access to the report data. And if they select this option, then it would send them the data as well as to Twitter. And there are about 10,000 accounts on this auto blocker list. Here, I'll try and find you the exact link here in a second. I've got it all somewhere around here. And then on that list, during the period, it was like a 2-month period or something like that. They examined the accounts on the list to see if they engaged in harassment according to Twitter's definition at the time in 2014. This was like fall of 2014 that this happened. And so they found that 0.66%, which was 65 accounts in total, on the list of GamerGate people had engaged in harassment according to Twitter's definition, and during that period. So over 99% of the accounts on the GamerGate list had not engaged in harassment. But there's 2 other studies too that we can talk about, and I'm going to link you these.
Nah, don't bother. Sum it up.
Okay, so
what's the point you're making?
I don't think that. I think the harassment was relatively rare from the GamerGate people themselves, especially. And I can't speak to the troll stuff, how prevalent they were. But
the main thing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, because I lived through that era. That was the main thing people encountered was when there was a hashtag GamerGate. it was mainly being like the tweets you would come across just under that. Pick a random one out of a hat. The main thing was people trolling other people. Granted, that's, as you
Well,
say,
it
that's
wasn't
not
though,
the
according
movement.
to the data though. Like, there's another study that looked at the. There's two other studies that looked at the data on the hashtag itself, um, and it didn't find that. So there's the Newsweek slash Brandwatch study, which Newsweek actually misrepresents the data on. You may find this interesting. I'll link you this as well. But they looked at negative sentiment, looking at the hashtag, and the vast majority of the tweets on the hashtag didn't contain negative sentiment towards the people involved, towards Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu, Leigh Alexander, or Zoe Quinn. But also, I don't think negative sentiment and harassment are the same thing. And it ended up being like 1.6% or something like that. Let's see. I'll get you the
I
exact.
mean, we're let me pull up the names here. We're talking about Zoe Quinn, Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu. These are people with actual careers who got the most wretched things sent to them. You had people quit the industry over this. When you talk about what actual effects did it have, either because trolls hijacked the movement or whatever. On the one hand, maybe some reforms to the industry that might not have happened without a specific group of folks saying this is GamerGate and we're gonna look at ethics in video game industry. On the other hand, actual doxing. On the other hand, actual terrible people going out and frankly making video games worse for everybody by saying, "Oh, it's never for anybody but just me, and people that look like me."
Well, I don't.
It seems strange to me that you're baffled by
Can
this
we watch a
perception.
video on stream together?
I'd prefer not. I want to talk to you.
Okay.
It just it the what seems strange to me is that you're surprised by my opinion of this group and that it's not like
Well, I
the
think it's
obvious
been
thing.
misrepresented. I don't think the GamerGate people were like against diversity. I don't think the vast majority of them, at least, I don't think they were. I think that they were like a very diverse group of people from across the political spectrum, people of like all religions and faiths and races and ethnicities. Um, yeah, I think it was a lot of men and women both together. I don't think that most of them supported harassment. I think that this was a false narrative that was promoted. Um, primarily, I
And
mean,
they're third party. They're third party trolls
well, there
basically
are third party
that
trolls
are
too.
that are
Yes, they
causing
like
the problem.
partly it's third party trolls, right? That's they're fucking with things too. But a lot of it's not just the third party trolls. I think that there was probably, and you might disagree with me on this a lot. There probably was like an ideological capture, like within games journalism at the time. And a lot of these people did have like this progressive, like woke, quote unquote, I don't know what to call it, ideology. And they perceived the Gamergate people as being like an out group, people who they don't like very much, in part because they're being criticized by the Gamergate people because of their perceived ethical violations, and then also too because a lot of these people have like different foundational values than like the Gamergate people do. The
I'd
Gamergate
put a
people were
caveat on that only.
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, if you're saying progressive or woke, I think that's a common way that it's that sort of mentality is viewed. They're just corporate. They're just trying to sell as much many clicks as they can, as many whatever's widgets or who's it's. And being nice to people, being accepting of people is a common way to do that. So yeah, they say go with the most milk toast thing. Yeah, let's get people of all colors and what
No, no,
have
I
you in
don't mean the
here.
video games. To be clear, I mean like the games
No, I
journalists.
mean the
Yeah,
journalists. I
yeah.
mean the journalists and the journalism and the opinions. I agree that yeah, fake for a
Well,
large
I
degree.
don't think
Yeah, of course.
I think some of them very are like legitimate. I think that they have like a different worldview than I have, which is fine.
But my
But
point being, it's attributed to wokeness. It's not that. It's capitalist. It's trying to appeal to as many people as possible, and
but
that gets people angry.
they're
But the
not
wrong
inclusive
folks
though.
can't.
They're not inclusive though. They're not inclusive to the GamerGate people. That's for sure. Um, but no, I think that they view things through like this ideological lens, and they don't want other viewpoints represented. And like the GamerGate people were like a very diverse coalition of people, but like mostly I don't have exact data on this yet, but well, I do have some data that It's mostly like a liberal group of people. So like their views are like very pro free speech, right? Like that was like a big viewpoint. Now people don't view that as a GamerGate value necessarily. Some people do, some people don't. But the people involved with GamerGate tend to be very pro free speech. The people who are like the quote
Or they
unquote,
say they are. Sure.
oh sure, yeah, they say they are. And then like the people who were like very much against GamerGate, like people um, like the game journals we talked about, like Leigh Alexander, um, and also some of the people who criticize GamerGate too, like I think like Zoe Quinn or like Brianna Wu are pretty illiberal people too. Like they've ended up engaging in harassment, and there was a lot of harassment on both sides. And Brianna Wu actually, if you want to call it harassment, what you did, I guess you can, but like they ended up harassing pro GamerGate people like Tim Saray, or neutral people like so Zoe Quinn went after Tim Saray. He was this game developer. He's working on The Last Night, this video game, and basically tried to destroy his career and reputation because he supported GamerGate. And then Brianna Wu, Brianna Wu encouraged people to boycott Hogwarts Legacy because she disagrees with Troy Levitt. But also because she's like anti J.K. Rowling. But one of the reasons that she states in her boycott campaign that she was promoting was specifically that the lead designer of the game disagrees with her and made videos criticizing her, or made a video that criticized her because she was trying to get the GDC to remove a reward for Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari. Like these people were like,
Okay.
doing a lot of like things that people have different opinions on, like the anti-GamerGate people. They have like they're also taking actions in the world at the same time that the GamerGate people are. Like that's partly why this whole thing blew up so big because they're
Well,
also
that's
in.
part of
Yeah.
that's well, go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I thought you were
No, no,
continuing.
you have like you have pro GamerGate people who are doing their own thing for like this several year period. You have anti GamerGate people who are doing their own thing, and like they tend to be more like have better relationships with like the mainstream media, whereas like the pro GamerGate people, I guess at the time had like better relationships with like the more YouTube or like
Hmm.
crowd, I guess you could say. And so like there's like these two divergent worlds that emerged. Like people are like they're
Yeah.
living in different realities, I guess you could say. Um,
Well, yeah, and I
mhm.
think that's sort of the main issue because when you say anti, if you were to ask me what does Tachyon Blue think GamerGate is, I would say a movement to support better ethics in game journalism. But if I were to then say what is anti GamerGate, I wouldn't say those are people who are for unethical
No,
game
I agree.
journalism.
I agree 1,000%. It's people who think
So
that
they're
GamerGate's
against
bad,
the trolls.
right?
So that's the question is like if you got one the pro side is for one thing and the anti side is against a totally unrelated thing, which uh, I'm not sure that you could calling them pro and anti Gamergate is accurate. Although I will say this, I'm delighted to learn that the trolls are not the Gamergate people. That right off the bat makes my worldview much happier. What do you think anti gamer? What when you say they're anti Gamergate?
I would use
What are you referring to?
self-identification. Yeah, I would use self-ID.
Okay, so
Well,
what do you
well, or
think
people who were
they
like,
would say they're against?
well, I think that they're against GamerGate. I think that that's basically it. I think that, or I wouldn't even just say self-ID. That's probably dishonest. I wouldn't. I don't think I'd say self-ID. I'd say self-ID or like if they like regularly criticize GamerGate on a regular basis. Or if they're like a part of
What
a
are they?
community like GamerGazi, like it's this subreddit called GamerGazi, um, and they were like they was like an anti people who don't like GamerGate all went there basically. Um, it's like that would call that like anti GamerGate.
Let's do a test here
Hmm.
for a second. Um, don't answer this question. Foxy's come in a little bit later into the conversation. She asks, "How is GamerGate a positive thing?" Don't answer the question, Foxy. We want to take advantage of the fact that you came in a little bit later. In your opinion, and I'm not asking you to be right here. I'm just surveying you. What do you think Gamergate is? In like one sentence, what is Gamergate?
It's a movement for ethics.
No, 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 not you,
Oh,
Tachyon.
sorry.
Foxy.
Oh, sorry.
Foxy, Foxy.
Go ahead.
Okay, so she thinks Gamergate is literally an online harassment campaign targeting women. That going into this conversation is what I would describe, what would have described Gamergate as well. Now, for Foxy, for clarification on your part, my new one sentence summary from interviewing Tachyon Blue is Gamergate is an online movement seeking ethics in gaming journalism. And I would add on to that, the reason you and I think it's about targeting women is because, according to Tachyon Blue, and you know my knowledge of the internet, trolls hijacked the reputation of the movement, leading to our opinions of it. All
Well,
right,
it's
we're
it's not
back.
just I don't yeah I don't I yes the trolls thing is part of it, but I do think there is I think it was partly a deliberate choice on some people's part to misrepresent
Mm.
this.
Mm.
Well, do you want to talk about? Man, I don't know if I want to go here. Do you want to talk about
I just want to understand, but
Yeah.
it's got to be in real simple terms because I am a simple
Okay.
man.
So one of like for instance, like one of the people I think was actively dishonest for sure. Let's say Brianna Wu. She harassed herself on Steam. This isn't I can send you archives. This isn't like a disputed thing. She even has like an explanation for it. Um, she says that she posted this message harassing herself because she wanted to guide people who were already going to harass her anyway, kind of into this forum. This one post where she calls herself like a terrible person and asks people, "Am I a terrible person? Or is Brianna Wu a terrible person?" She says actually, um, and then she says, "Go at it, people!" Right? And she says that she did this because she wanted to guide the harassment in one place, and then she also probably misrepresented um, the events like surrounding her supposedly fleeing her home because of Gamergate. Because
She, well,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, my everything. No, the it froze for a second, but it's fine now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like Brianna Wu, like she says that she fled her home because of this tweet from this account called Chatter Whiteman. Um, the name of their handle was at Chatter Whiteman, but their name was Death to Brianna, and it was basically this egg account that somebody made, brand new account on Twitter, and she says that she fled her home because of this, because this account was threatening to kill her, and posted a dox, an address, presumably hers. Um, and then she goes to New York Comic Con, um, but she talks about how she's homeless and stuff like that. This was the same weekend, and then but then she's supposedly homeless during this few months, um, but she does a bunch of live stream interviews from her house, five of them
Hmm.
actually, during a 3 month period. So it seems
This
like
is a lot of stuff about one
yeah.
person.
Well, she has
Give
an
me the
explanation.
headline.
Yeah, she has an explanation. She says that the reason she did the interviews from her home was because she didn't have access to a computer and she wanted to go and go back home to do the interviews to talk about the harassment and talk about how she was afraid for her life and had to flee her home from her house during the interviews. But she thought that was important because she didn't have a computer to do it from. But just seemed kind of weird.
Okay, so oh boy, this page is unresponsive. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Well, I can't. Oh boy, I'm just gonna keep hitting wait instead of kill page. Um, here's the deal. I just want to jump to then in case everything.
Uh oh, he's gone now.
I'm glad the stream's still up. That is lovely. All right, I'm gonna try sharing this now. 1 second. I have to redo this. So I hear what you're saying, but here's what I see. Because you seemed surprised earlier when I said like, why like how do you not address the reputation and is it really what you're saying it is? This when I say that the average person hears about Gamergate and thinks right-wing psychopaths uh harassing people. AI overview that's scrubbing the internet and taking the general consensus of what people are talking about when they're talking about Gamergate. A harassment campaign. Gamergate was a harassment campaign that targeted women in the video game industry. It was described as a culture war over issues such as ba 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 ba. Okay. Uh, okay, this is possibly what killed my page. Here's Britannica. Gamergate, an online harassment campaign in 2014 to 2015 that targeted women in the video game industry. There's my point is not that this is the correct thing
Mhm.
and other people define what it is. My point is that's the impression of what it is.
Well, I think some of that
And
was deliberate too, actually. Like Ryu Long. So the Wikipedia article, which you didn't bring up, but I just want to say I have not gone in depth on the Wikipedia article or the Britannic article yet. I intend to. There's gonna be a whole version of the one of the volumes in the book series is going to be specifically talking about that Wikipedia and Britannica, and what they got right, what they got wrong, right?
well, my point is if we're gonna learn anything positive from this, I think you said you would call the end of Gamergate 2018. Fair enough. I think the thing that's positive that's already been accomplished, yeah, maybe there is a stronger passion for ethics in the video game industry, and I welcome that. But thing number two then is that we have got to figure out how to stop trolls from defining our lives. Because when you search online for what is Gamergate, it has absolutely nothing to do with the ethics in video game industry and
Well,
everything to do.
I believe Kathy Young's article actually comes up on the first page of Google, does it not?
Let's see. What's
Everything
her
you know, almost
article?
everything you know about Gamergate's wrong.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, from 5 years ago in Medium. Yeah,
Yeah,
that does come up, but you know, I it's hard for me to to disregard the common view of Gamergate as a serious thing.
I think you should
Uh,
watch this one video. It's 6 minutes. You don't have to watch the full thing, but I think there would be value in it. I think it might help you.
well, summarize it for me. What do they talk about?
It's people involved with Gamergate
Mhm.
holding up signs and talking about why they support the movement and why they feel like it's minorities and women who support Gamergate, why they feel like they're being misrepresented, basically. This was called Not
My
Your
point
Shield, if
is
you've heard of that.
my point is not what the movement was actually about, but
Mhm.
more about not more, but entirely about the fact that the name of the movement is now put on what you say, and I'm going to take your word for it because you're in the movement, so you know more than me here. What you say is unrelated people, totally unrelated people, basically just online hate mongers. But when the average person, at least now I take that back, when people from my group, whatever that group is, hear about Gamergate, they think of the third party people that burst in and took things over. And I'm hoping we might be able to learn or at least come up with some concepts of how we could prevent this. A future serious movement getting hijacked by the trolls.
I don't know. I don't. I wish I don't. I wish I had advice for you. I don't know. I don't
I
think that
got
there's
none.
much that can be done without like the cure being worse than the disease. Like if I know some people have proposed like if we got rid of anonymity online and everybody had to like have their real name out there at all times, that might like reduce. I don't even know what the studies show on that, if it does or not. But even if it would, like I think that like the risk would be too great. I think that there's value in anonymity. I think there's value in people being able to talk privately and being able to gather and have conversations in private and also anonymously too. I think that there can be, and you would probably recognize that too, right? Like if you have people who are living in a country where like homosexuality is punished, if those people have online communities and forums where they feel like they can talk anonymously because they feel safer there than they would in a Facebook group, for instance, for Saudi gay people.
I don't know. I'm deeply sad. Well, let me say this. You did give me a glimmer of hope. I was gonna say I'm deeply sad because the trolls seem to run the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
And any serious conversation gets derailed by nonsense. But I'll say this: I came in thinking the GamerGate people were indistinguishable from the trolls, and you have made it clear, and you've shown me examples that show otherwise. That the core of this movement was something admirable. And even if you don't think, for some reason I disagree with ethics in video game journalism, it was still. I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah.
It was still okay. Good. I'll worry about this frozen picture later. It was still something that makes sense, you know. So to discover that the problem we have is simply trolls ruining things, at least makes me feel like not everybody in the world is terrible. I,
Well,
it's
that's
not much.
a positive. Well, honestly, this, yeah. I mean, that's all I say. That's all I care about. But that's basically, I think, the takeaway that I want people to have. That it was that GamerGate wasn't an online harassment campaign. Um, that it was. I mean, there were people who were engaging in harassment on both sides, but it wasn't an online harassment campaign. Like this had involved over 10,000 people easily. Even Randy Harper's anti-GamerGate block list had 10,000 people on it roughly. Um, yeah, it just. I think the people involved were smeared or misrepresented intentionally or unintentionally. Probably a little bit of both. Um, yeah, and I think that third-party trolls harass people too. I think that some of that got blamed on GamerGate. Um, and then yeah, that's the takeout I want people to have. So like I guess I had a successful conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Tachyon Blue, thank you for joining me. I'm gonna allow my computer to crash
Oh,
now,
let me
but
shout myself
it
out with my
was
project.
interesting. Yes,
All
please
right.
do.
So thanks for having me on, by the way. I appreciate it. Um, yeah, I'm Tachyon Blue. You can find me on YouTube, on Twitter, on Kick, on Twitch. I'm a live streamer, a political live streamer. But right now I'm focused on the book. I'm working on two other projects too. I'm working on a book documenting the war in Ukraine as well. I've interviewed my first person for that. And I've also documented the people involved with the multi-user dungeon scene, people who play text-based MMOs. But right now my main focus is the people of GamerGate. That's the name of my upcoming multi-volume book series. Volume 1 is done. I'll be announcing a Kickstarter date here within like the next few days. So, assuming, yeah, I have to. There's still a couple back behind the scenes stuff, but within like a week, possibly less, I should have a date set, and we'll be good to go. I'm really asking that people check that out. The People of GamerGate. It's not up yet, but follow me on social media. Follow me on YouTube. I'll have more announcements to come, and I'll be telling the story of the people involved in GamerGate on both sides. I've interviewed 70 plus people involved, and I think it'll be a great project. And I hope you are all happy with it and decide to support it. I really need your help.
All right, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Gang, I would like to give you a proper outro, but unfortunately, I can't because this